Be me, Derek, 29. Engineer, decent six-figure salary, the kind of guy who actually reads a contract before he signs it. Boring on paper, I know. I save money, I check the math twice, I keep receipts in a folder like some kind of accountant nobody asked for. I drive a car that's paid off and I'm weirdly proud of it. That's the whole personality, more or less. Met Brittany about 2 years before any of this started. She was 28, worked in marketing, sharp, funny, could talk circles around me at a dinner table without breaking a sweat. I like that. I'm not a fast talker, so being around someone who is felt like a balance instead of a competition. I figured I'd finally found someone who'd split a life with me down the middle. Like a teammate, you know? That was the whole pitch in my head. 2 people, 1 team, problems get solved together, money's a thing we both look at, decisions are a thing we both make. Turns out I read the situation about, as well as I read everything else in my life back then, which is to say I missed the fine print entirely, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell it the way it actually went, start to finish. So we'd been together a good while, things were solid, no real fights, and I decided I wanted to marry her. Saved up for the ring over a few months, picked it out myself, didn't let anyone help because I wanted it to be mine. I'd been saving seriously for years at that point. Not for a wedding specifically, just for a life. A house down the line, a cushion, the boring grown-up stuff. I worked a lot of late nights to build that number up. So when I say I had savings, I don't mean I was handed anything. I mean I'd earned it 1 paycheck at a time and watched it grow on purpose. Did the whole knee thing at a spot that mattered to us. She cried, said yes, hugged me so hard I felt something in my back pop. Best day I'd had in years, honestly. No exaggeration. Drove home that night, feeling like I'd finally gotten one thing in life completely right. I had no clue I'd just opened a tab I'd be paying on for the next month and a half. For the first few days after the proposal, everything was great, by the way. We told her family, we told mine, people were happy, my mom cried, the whole thing. I genuinely thought the hard part was behind me. I thought the proposal was the big swing, and now it was just party planning and cake tasting, cute couple stuff. That lasted about a week. About a week after the proposal, she sits me down and shows me her phone. It's a board she'd been building on one of those pinning sites, photos saved up in a grid. And it is not small. I'm talking hundreds of saved images, scrolling and scrolling. Dresses, flower walls, lighting setups, tables that look like they belong in a magazine spread, little place cards and fancy handwriting. I said something like, "Wow, you've been busy." She laughed and told me she'd been planning this since she was a little kid. Fine, cute, whatever. Most people daydream about their wedding, I get it. Then she says the number, $90,000. I actually laughed out loud. I genuinely thought it was a bit like she was throwing out a crazy figure to make a point, and we'd land somewhere normal, so I said, 90 grand, good one. She didn't laugh back. She just looked at me like I'd said something rude at a funeral. And then she said it. "Derek, I only do this once." That line. I'd come to hate that line more than any other combination of words in the English language. I only do this once. She said it the way you'd state a law of physics, like it ended the conversation before it started. And at the time, like an idiot, I let it end the conversation. Because I loved her, and I had savings. And I told myself, you know what? It's the biggest day of her life. Let her have the big day. I framed it as a one-time thing in my head. Spend it, get the photos, move on, build the real life after. That was the deal I made. Problem is, nobody else was in that meeting. I made the deal with myself and just assumed she'd signed it too. First real planning session was with a wedding planner she'd already found and basically hired before I'd agreed to a single thing. Nice enough lady, very polished, talked with her hands, had a binder thick as a phone book. She sits us down and starts walking through the plan. And the numbers start landing one after another, like hail on a roof. The dress alone was $12,000. I'm sitting there doing math. 12 grand for a thing you wear for 6 hours and then seal in a box in a closet forever. Then the videographer. Not a guy with a camera, a whole team, 8,000 for a team to film one afternoon. Then the venue. Oceanfront, 30,000 just to stand on the grass and say some words with the water behind us. Then catering, plated dinner, 3 courses. A number per head that made my eye twitch. Then the open bar for 150 people, the kind of bar where folks order things they can't pronounce. Then a band, a real band, because a DJ apparently wasn't going to cut it. Then the cake, and the cake had its own price tag that could have bought a decent used motorcycle. Then save the dates, then the actual invitations, thick paper, hand-lettered, the whole production. Then hair and makeup for her and all the bridesmaids, a full morning of it. Then a separate line for the honeymoon that hadn't even been discussed with me yet, but was already penciled in. And Brittany is nodding along to every single line like the planner is reading her a bedtime story she already loves. Not one flinch, not one, maybe that's too much. Just a slow, happy nod down the entire page. I kept waiting for her to react to a number the way I was reacting to it on the inside. She never did. At one point, I cleared my throat and asked, trying to sound completely normal about it, "So, what's our budget looking like overall?" She turned to me and said, real flat, no hesitation, "It's my day, not our day, her day." I remember the planner kind of half smiled at her binder, like she'd heard that exact line 100 times before. I let it slide. Told myself it was wedding stress, brides get like that. It's a stereotype because it's at least partly true. That was the first little red flag I quietly folded up and put in my pocket and pretended I hadn't seen. Spoiler, there'd be a whole lot of flags in that pocket by the end. About 12 days in, I tried to do the one thing I'm actually good at. I made a spreadsheet. Nothing fancy, just line items, a running total, a column for who pays what, a tab for tracking the deposits so we wouldn't lose the thread. I was honestly a little proud of it. Brought it up one evening, laptop open, ready to go through it together like two adults planning a shared expense. She barely glanced at the screen. Told me she didn't want to turn the most romantic time of her life into a math class. Said the planning was already exhausting and that I had no idea how much emotional labor went into coordinating a wedding. Emotional labor. I asked, genuinely, not as a dig, what that meant in terms of who was actually paying for what. I wasn't trying to start anything. I just wanted to understand the plan, the way I'd want to understand any big purchase. If we were buying a car together, I'd want to know the same thing. But the second the conversation touched money, her whole face changed, like I'd insulted her. She said, "I wouldn't get it." And that was the funeral for the spreadsheet. I closed the laptop and didn't bring it back out for a long while. Kept paying, though. The deposits were already going out the door. Venue hold, photographer hold, the deposit on the dress fitting, all of it coming straight off my card. I want to be crystal clear about something. At no point in any of this did Brittany offer a single dollar. Not because she was broke. She made good money, had savings of her own. She just never once connected the wedding to the concept of money leaving her own account. In her head, the money was a kind of weather. It just happened, and I was the sky. There was a dress fitting somewhere in this stretch that kind of summed the whole thing up. She wanted me there, which I thought was sweet, so I went. And it was a nice afternoon for about 20 minutes. Then the consultant started talking alterations, and a custom veil, and some beading add-on, and every "would you like" was a yes from Brittany before I could even register the price. At the end, the consultant slid the updated total across and looked at me, not her. Everyone in that room knew exactly who the total was for. I signed. Brittany was glowing in the mirror and didn't so much as glance at the number. I stood there holding the receipt like a coat check guy. Somewhere around day 18, the guest list situation went completely sideways. We'd agreed, or I genuinely thought we'd agreed, on about 100 people. Then her bridesmaids got involved. A little group of them, I won't bother naming them, they moved as one unit anyway. And suddenly the list is sitting at 150. Second cousins I'd never heard of, co-workers of hers, a few people Brittany flat out admitted she didn't even like, but had to invite. Every extra head was another seat, another plate, another few pours at that open bar. I actually ran the per person number once, and it was genuinely high. Not round up a little high. This is a car payment per table high. So 50 extra people wasn't 50 handshakes, it was a serious slice of money. I pointed out, as calmly as I could manage, that 50 extra guests was a serious jump in the total. She told me I was trying to control her wedding. I said I was trying to afford her wedding. She said those were the same thing. I genuinely did not have a reply to that. So I said nothing, which was a skill I was getting very good at very fast. The bridesmaids were their own whole weather system, by the way. Whenever they were around, the budget only ever moved one direction. One of them had been to some destination wedding, and now that was the standard. Another kept mentioning what so-and-so's husband had paid for, like a scoreboard. And Brittany soaked all of it up and brought it home as new requirements. I started to notice that after every time she saw that group, there'd be a fresh upgrade waiting for me the next day. They weren't planning a wedding with her, so much as bidding up a number on my behalf. The honeymoon line on the planner's sheet quietly grew too, around this time. It had started as a vague placeholder and turned into a specific resort, overwater suite, the kind of thing you see in ads. Nobody asked me if I wanted to go there or could swing it on top of everything else. It just appeared, fully formed, like the flowers and the band and the rest. I remember a night around then where I lay awake doing the running, total in my head instead of sleeping, and a small voice went, "You can still stop this." And a louder voice went, "Don't be that guy. You proposed, you committed, men keep their word." So I told the small voice to shut up. That worked for about another week and a half. Around day 23, it was the flowers. She'd found a florist, some boutique outfit, all organic, locally sourced, seasonal. $6,000 for flowers. Flowers that, by their entire nature, are designed to die within a week. I asked carefully if maybe we could do really nice flowers that weren't priced like a used car down payment. She went quiet in that specific way that meant I'd messed up. And later, she told me I didn't understand the vision. The vision. I was starting to understand the vision with perfect clarity. The vision was an extremely expensive day with her in the exact center of it, and my role in the vision was to nod along and keep tapping my card on readers. Around the same stretch, there was the invitation thing. She'd ordered samples from a few places, and the one she landed on was the priciest by a wide margin. Thick cards, gold edges, a wax seal on every single envelope. 150 of them. I did the quick math out loud, just the math, no opinion attached. And she heard math and immediately heard attack. Told me I was making her feel like she had to justify wanting nice things to a man who only cared about numbers. Said that kind of nitpicking was a little toxic, that it was the same energy as men who control their partners through money. I hadn't controlled anything. I'd said a number out loud. But I was learning that saying a number out loud was now the crime. Marcus. Married guy, known him for years, went through his own big wedding a while back, so he'd seen the inside of this machine up close. We're grabbing a beer one evening, and he asks how the planning's going. And at first I gave the normal answer, good, busy, you know how it is. Then he asked what the budget was landing at, and I told him, and he kinda choked on his drink. I start listing off the numbers, almost like it's a joke. You won't believe this next one. The dress, the flowers, the venue, I'm rattling them off. I think part of me was hoping he'd laugh and say, "Yeah, that's just weddings, man. Mine was nuts too." And he doesn't laugh. He sets his glass down and asks me exactly one question. How much of this is she paying for? I opened my mouth and absolutely nothing came out, because the honest answer was nothing. $0. He saw it land on my face. He leans in and goes, "Bro, listen to me. She's not planning a wedding. She's planning a photo shoot and you're the budget." I waved him off. Told him he didn't know Brittany, that it was different with us, that he was being cynical. Classic stuff you say when somebody tells you the truth, a little too early for your liking. He didn't push it either. That's the thing about Marcus. He just shrugged, said, "All right, hope I'm wrong," and changed the subject to something dumb. But I'll be honest with you, that question got in. It lodged itself in the back of my skull like a splinter. How much is she paying for? I started hearing it at red lights, in the shower, sitting in meetings I should have been paying attention to. I didn't act on it yet, but it would not leave. I did try one small test around then, looking back on it. One evening, I brought up the house thing, gently, just floating it. Said something like, "You know, if we trim the wedding a bit, we could put a real down payment on a place." She didn't even let me finish the sentence. Waved it off, said we could figure out the house later, that the wedding was happening now, and the house was a someday problem. Then she went right back to scrolling photos of centerpieces. I remember sitting there thinking, the one thing that's actually ours, that we'd both live in, is the someday problem. The party for 150 people is the now problem. I filed that away too and said nothing, naturally. Then her mother stepped into the picture for real. Carol. Nice lady on the surface, the type who hugs you and somehow makes the hug feel like a warning shot. Carol decided that the budget was now her business too. She'd call Brittany, and then Brittany would relay Carol's opinions to me, like they were facts of nature handed down from a mountain. Carol thought the dress should be even more expensive. Carol thought a real man doesn't count pennies at his own daughter's wedding. That one got delivered to me directly, over dinner, with Carol sitting right across the table watching my face while I took it. A real man doesn't count pennies. I just nodded and kept chewing. It kept coming after that too, not as a one-off. Every couple of days there'd be a new piece of Carol wisdom relayed through Brittany. A real man pays without being asked. A real man doesn't make his bride feel guilty. A real man understands a wedding is the one day a woman gets to be a queen. And somewhere under all of it, never said out loud but always there, was the idea that if I had a problem with any number, the problem was me, my character, my manhood, never the number itself. Then Carol launched into the speech she clearly loved telling, the one about how her own husband gave her the wedding of her dreams decades back, and how that's simply what a man who loves a woman does, no discussion. She said it like a closed case, like there was no possible thing a person could say in response. Now, this is the part that genuinely flipped a switch in me. I mentioned that dinner to my dad a little later, just venting, telling him about the whole wedding of her dreams speech. And my dad kinda laughed through his nose, because my dad actually knew Carol's husband back in the day, ran in some of the same circles years ago. And according to him, Carol's so-called dream wedding was a backyard thing. Folding chairs on a lawn, a cousin running the barbecue, a sheet cake from a grocery store. Cost almost nothing, even accounting for all the years that have passed since. She'd been telling this big money fairy tale for 3 decades, and it had never actually happened. She was bluffing. This entire time, bluffing, and using me as the mark to make the bluff pay off. My dad didn't make a big production out of it. That's not his way. He just looked at me over the top of his coffee mug and asked me one quiet thing. Son, you sure about this? That's it. No lecture, no orders, no, I told you so. Just, you sure? My dad's been married to my mom a long time, and they didn't have a $90,000 anything. They built everything slow, together, both hands on it. So, when he asks, you sure, it carries a little weight, because he's got the receipts to back up his version of how this is supposed to work. He wasn't telling me to run. He was just making sure I'd actually looked at what I was signing, which, looking back, I hadn't, not really. And now, between that and Marcus's question, I was carrying 2 splinters around. How much is she paying for? You sure about this? I drove home that night, and I didn't even turn the radio on. Just sat with both of them the entire way back, hands at 10 and 2, thinking. Somewhere past the 40-day mark, I finally did the thing I should have done on day 1. I sat down, opened that old spreadsheet, and I put in every single real number. Not the rough estimates from the first meeting, the actual current figures. The dress upgrade, the extra 50 guests, the $6,000 flowers, the band that had quietly replaced the cheaper DJ option without anyone bothering to ask me, the upgraded linens, the late venue add-ons, the second photographer, and the total wasn't 90,000 anymore. It had climbed past 94 and it was still moving. I sat there staring at that number for a long, long time. And then I noticed something that made my stomach drop a little. In that entire spreadsheet, every line was about her day. Her dress, her flowers, her venue, her guests, her vision, her photos. There was not one single line anywhere in it that was about us. Nothing about a house, nothing about kids someday. Nothing about the actual marriage that was supposed to begin the morning after this very expensive party ended. I'm an engineer. When I look at a system, I ask what it's actually built to do, what it's for. And this system was not built to start a marriage. It was built to stage an event with her at the center, and me standing quietly off to the side, working the cash register. So I tried one last time. In genuine good faith, I really did. I came to her with what I honestly believed was a fair offer. I said, let's do 30,000. Still a real wedding, still beautiful, still more than most people on earth spend. And let's take the other 60 and put it down on a house, our house, something we both own and live in and build a life inside of. I thought it was a good pitch. I thought any actual partner would at minimum hear it out. She did not hear it out. She went off, told me I didn't value her, said that 30,000 meant I thought she was worth less than other women whose husbands made it happen, said she'd be humiliated in front of her bridesmaids if the wedding came off looking cheap. And then, the part that really stuck the landing. She said my whole attitude about the money was toxic, that I was being a controlling, toxic man, that the simple fact that I needed to talk about a budget at all was a red flag about my masculine need for control. She'd picked this language up somewhere, and she aimed every word of it at me in one breath. It was wild to hear, honestly. I'm standing there having just offered to spend 30 grand on a party and put 60 grand toward a home for the two of us. And somehow, in her telling I was the controlling one, the toxic one, the man trying to crush a woman's dreams. Not the guy footing the entire bill alone. Not the guy who'd been told for over a month that his only acceptable role was wallet. Somehow, the toxic man in this story was the one who wanted to buy us a house. I stood there in our own kitchen and I waited for one word about the house. One word about us. About the future. The thing the wedding was supposedly the front door to. Nothing came. Not a single word. It was all the dress and the day and the bridesmaids and how badly I was making her feel. And that was the exact moment, standing there, that I finally understood the thing I'd been refusing to understand for 40-some days straight. This was never, at any point, about a wedding. I went quiet. But not the old quiet, where I just fold the flag and tuck it in my pocket and keep paying. A different kind of quiet. I let her finish, told her I needed to think, and I went to bed early. Didn't sleep a minute. I lay there in the dark and I ran the whole thing back, beginning to end, like reviewing security footage. The proposal, the board, the number, the planner, it's my day. The spreadsheet she refused to even look at. The guest list ballooning, the flowers. Marcus setting his glass down. Carol, a real man doesn't count pennies. The fake dream wedding, my dad, and you sure about this? And the toxic speech in the kitchen. And at no point anywhere in that entire footage, going all the way back to the night I got down on one knee, could I find a single moment where she'd ask me what I wanted. Not one. What kind of wedding did I want? Did I want a house first? Did I even want 150 near strangers at this thing? How did I feel about spending almost everything I'd saved? Never came up, not once, not even casually. Not her day, never our day. I was furniture with a bank account attached. Nice furniture, sure, but furniture. And the thing that really got me, lying there, wasn't even the money. I'd made peace with spending money. I'm not cheap. I'd have happily blown a chunk on a great day for both of us. It was that she'd had 47 days, almost 7 full weeks. And in all that time, she never got curious about me even once. Not curious about what I pictured for the day. Not curious about what scared me. Not curious about whether I was okay watching my savings drain out. A teammate gets curious about you. A sponsor just checks if the check cleared. I'd been telling myself I was marrying a teammate. The footage said otherwise. Next morning, I got up early, made coffee, and started making phone calls. And this is the part where reading every boring contract, my whole life finally paid for itself. Because I had read every single one of those vendor agreements before I signed them. Cover to cover, the fine print, the cancellation sections, all of it. And most of the big deposits had cancellation windows, fully or mostly refundable if you pulled out before a certain date. And we were still inside those windows. Barely on a couple of them, but inside. So I called the planner first, told her calmly that we were canceling. She was a professional about it, said she understood completely, and started the paperwork. I called the venue next, then the photographer, then the florist before they'd ordered a single stem. Called the band, called the invitation place before they ran the print job, called the cake people. Each call was short. Hi, we're canceling. What do I need to do to close this out cleanly? Most of them had done this before, you could tell. A wedding falling apart is not exactly a rare event in that industry. One by one, I shut it all down. And one by one, the money either started coming back or simply stopped going out. By the time I hung up the last call, I'd saved the overwhelming majority of it. Then I sat down at the kitchen table and waited for Brittany to get home. She walked in, saw my face, and she could tell immediately that something had changed. I didn't yell. I want that on the record. I never once raised my voice through any of this. I just told her, plainly, that I'd canceled the wedding. All of it. The planner, the venue, the dress order, the flowers, the band, the whole machine. She went white. Then she went loud. Asked how I could possibly do this to her. how I could humiliate her like this, what on earth she was supposed to tell everyone now. And I said the only thing that felt completely true. You told me you only do this once. Turns out you do it 0 times. She stared at me like the words didn't compute, like a vending machine that just ate the card. I think on some level, she'd never once pictured a version of events where I said no. In her whole plan, Derek refuses wasn't a box that existed. I told her that for 47 days I'd watched her plan a party entirely about herself, and that in all that time, she'd never once asked what I wanted out of any of it. Not the wedding, not the marriage, not the life that was supposed to come after. Told her I wasn't a budget with a face stuck on it. That I'd come into this wanting a teammate, and she'd hired a sponsor and forgotten to mention it to him. She called me toxic again, called me controlling again. Said a real man would have just made it happen. Same script, only louder this time. And somewhere in the middle of it, I realized those words had completely stopped landing on me. They used to. For a month and a half straight, those words used to put me right back in line. Now they just sounded like a vendor reading me a quote I'd already decided not to pay. And here's the strange part. I wasn't even angry when I said all of it. For a month and a half, I'd been carrying this low hum of feeling crazy. Like I was the unreasonable one for noticing the obvious. Saying it out loud, plainly, in my own kitchen, the hum just stopped. I wasn't the crazy one. I'd been right the whole time. I'd just been too polite to act on it. That quiet certainty was almost the best feeling in the whole story. I took the ring back, put it in the box, didn't make a scene out of it, just did it quietly while she was still going. Then I packed a bag and went and stayed at Marcus's place that night. He opened the door, took one look at me, and didn't ask a single question. Just stepped aside and handed me a beer. The fallout came fast, and it came in waves. Carol called the very next day, and that call was a whole event on its own. Started with this how I'd shattered her daughter's heart, moved on to how I'd never in my life find anyone half as good as Brittany, and ended somewhere around how no real man treats a woman this way. I let her run all the way out of road. Then I said, very calm, that I'd heard her own wedding was lovely. The folding chairs, the backyard, the barbecue, the grocery store cake, and that I had a lot of genuine respect for a couple who'd started a marriage without setting 90 grand on fire to do it. Dead silence on the line. Then she hung up. Never heard that dream wedding speech again, from her or anybody. I almost felt bad for half a second. Then I remembered she'd sat across a dinner table and called me less of a man for asking what something cost. Using a story that wasn't even true. The bad feeling passed pretty quick after that. The bridesmaids, the little unit that had grown the guest list and pushed every single upgrade, went completely silent overnight. No calls, no messages, nothing. Not even the fake supportive kind, which honestly told me everything I needed to know about them. Turns out when there's no open bar left to plan and no budget left to spend, the enthusiasm just evaporates into thin air. They were never my friends, they were the catering committee, and the event was canceled. Brittany tried a few different angles over the following weeks. First it was straight anger, long messages about how I'd ruined everything. Then it shifted to a careful note about how we could scale it back and compromise. Which was almost funny, because scaling it back was the exact thing I'd offered before she stood in our kitchen and called me toxic for offering it. Then came the version where suddenly none of it had been that serious, and I'd massively overreacted to normal wedding planning. Then, weeks after that, came the last one. A long message that started soft, said she'd been doing a lot of thinking, and that maybe she'd gotten caught up. And for about 10 seconds, it almost sounded like an actual apology. Then the back half of it turned into how my reaction was still toxic, how a healthier man would have communicated instead of canceling, how I'd punished her. So even the apology had a bill attached. Even sorry came with terms. I read it twice and didn't reply. Around that same time, a guy I work with got engaged and started going through the exact same opening moves. The board, the big number, the it's her day. He asked me, half joking, if I had any advice since I'd just been through it. I told him exactly one thing. Bring up the house early and watch what she does with it. He laughed. I didn't. I didn't take any of the off-ramps she put out. Not because I was trying to punish her. I wasn't. I just finally completely believed what I'd spent 47 days watching. Here's the thing about getting steamrolled for a month and a half. By the end of it, you've got an extremely clear picture, basically in writing, of exactly who a person is when they believe the money is automatic and the day belongs only to them. I had that picture now, in high definition, and I wasn't going to sit there and argue with my own eyes. Last thing I heard, through a mutual friend, she's telling people I couldn't handle a strong woman, that I got scared and bolted. And you know what? I'll give her that one. I couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle paying $94,000 for a single day that had no room left in it for me anywhere. Couldn't handle being called toxic for wanting a house instead of a $30,000 lawn for an afternoon. Couldn't handle being the only actual person inside a supposedly two-person partnership. Guilty on every count. I handled the invoices just fine, though. Read every last one of them, start to finish. That's the part she always leaves out when she tells it. Here's the part I actually care about, the part that matters. About 6 months after all of this, I took that money, the money that didn't vanish into an oceanfront field full of dying flowers, and I put it down on a house. A real house, my name on the deed, quiet street, a yard that doesn't cost $6,000 to make look decent. I painted the inside myself over a few weekends, rolled it out room by room with a podcast going. Marcus came over and helped me wrestle the couch through the front door, and we ordered too much food and sat on that couch in an empty living room. He looked around at the bare walls and just said, "Good call, man." And that was the only time either of us ever brought it up again. Didn't need a speech. The empty room said it fine. And it was, no exaggeration, one of the best days I'd had in years. No coordinator, no vision, no emotional labor lecture. Just a guy sitting in a house he could actually afford, that he owned outright on paper, that nobody on earth could call him toxic for buying. The quiet in that house was a different kind of quiet than the ones I'd been collecting all those weeks. Not the swallow it and keep paying quiet, the kind where nobody's about to hand you a bill or a lecture. I slept better in that empty house than I had in months in the apartment. And I think about that line of hers sometimes. I only do this once. She was right, in a way she never meant. She did get to plan it exactly one time. She just never once got to have it. I don't tell this whole thing to drag her specifically. Brittany isn't some cartoon villain twirling a mustache. She's a person who genuinely, fully believed the entire thing was supposed to revolve around her, and that my one job was to fund it and smile on cue. And honestly, the scariest part of the whole story is how close I came to just agreeing with her. I almost signed it. I almost spent every dollar I'd saved on a single day where I wasn't even really a guest. I was the line of credit. If Marcus hadn't set his glass down and asked that one question, if my dad hadn't asked his over a cup of coffee, I might have gone through with the entire thing and called it love. So if there's anything in this for the next guy who reads it, it isn't "don't get married," and it sure isn't "all women are like this," because they're flat out not. It's just this. Watch what happens the very first time you bring up the money. Watch whether it comes back our day or my day. Watch closely whether anyone, even once, asks you what you actually want. Because the wedding is just the first invoice. The marriage is every single invoice that comes after it. And if you're already the only one paying before the thing has even started, then you've already got your answer, whether you want it or not. I'm not bitter about it anymore. That's the honest part. For a while I was, sure. But bitterness is just a bill you keep paying on a thing that's already over. And I was done paying bills on that one. These days when I tell it, it mostly just feels like a story about almost missing something obvious. The numbers were right there the whole time. I just didn't want to add them up. 2 questions from 2 guys who cared about me did what 47 days of red flags couldn't. I got mine on day 47, cost me a ring and a month and a half of my life. Cheapest deal I ever made. TLDR fiancée demanded a $90,000 wedding because she only does this once, never put in a cent. Called me toxic for wanting a house instead. So I read the cancellation clauses, pulled the plug on day 47, got the money back, and bought a house with it. She did, in fact, only do it once.